Yes. Sure. Elkton Sandra. Hi, Sandra.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been bringing you a series of webinars during the pandemic, and the popularity has grown and grown. I must get at least one email or comment or text a day, if not more, thanking me for doing these webinars. You have to realize it's a little bit selfish because I get to learn an awful lot doing these. So I'm so glad you're all getting to come along for the ride and listen, because it's such amazing people that I've had on my show. And we're looking at turning it into podcasts because so many people want to be able to listen to it in their car. So we'll see which ones work best as a podcast. I'm just starting to figure that out. So don't expect me to have that done right away, but just so that, you know, we're working on it so that if you're in your car, you can listen to some of these webinars. Tonight, my guest is Diane Sept. And I have known Diane since the 90s, I think.
Early 90s,
Early
yes.
90s, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember exactly where we met. And Diane used to live in Pennsylvania, I know that. And so we go way back, even though there's many, many times when our paths have gone in different directions. We've always kind of kept an antenna out to know where the other one is, except when she moved to Washington State. I missed that. I thought you were still in Pennsylvania. But Diane has worked with gaited horses most of her life, I think, right?
Since the late 70s.
Okay. And so I'm going to let her introduce herself to you. So it's probably better coming from her than from me. But tonight we're going to talk about smooth gaited horses. And Diane, thank you so much for being my guest tonight. I know it was a bit of a challenge to figure out the technology. She's had to go to a friend's place to get a good enough Wi-Fi connection. And we worked out a few details on presenting the PowerPoint. So I'll be running the slideshow tonight. So Diane, just give us like a bit of background. You've been in the horse world for so long. So you really have a lot of depth and experience. So let us, tell us a bit about you and how you got where you are today.
Okie doke. I will say to that Wendy, I think, just called me old, but I'm not sure about that.
I didn't call you old.
I'm going to jump right to the very last thing she said, and how did I get to where I am? And I will tell you, I know you have to take advantage of opportunity, but I have been very, very blessed and lucky to somehow be with people who were incredible mentors and took me under their wing, and I hung on for every word there was. And some of those were maybe not so good, by the way. And some have been just the path that I, Wendy, and everybody else on your webinars. That is one thing that I have loved about the webinars, one of the things. And I've probably taken advantage of I'm going to bet 15 at least of these webinars that Wendy has done. And the wonderful thing is that so far, everybody that I have listened to across the board, it is the same thread of wanting to do the right thing, the well-being, the knowledgeable thing for the horse and people. So I, of course, grew up a horse crazy girl like everybody in Hamilton, Montana. And I couldn't have a horse because we lived in the town, blah, blah. And then finally, my mother and I moved to the country. I got my quarter horse, of course, because I was a cowgirl. I started out at a ranch doing Western rodeo, and my mother got a spotted up strawberry roan Tennessee walking horse. It was so embarrassing to be seen with her because this thing was a funny looking critter. And most people thought it was an Appaloosa. But ironically, and my mother said, I'm too old to learn to ride anything but a walking horse. Oh. Anyway, I ended up doing rodeo with that spotted up strawberry roan Tennessee walking horse. And that started to shift my thought, and it certainly drew some attention. I was then very lucky. I was at a working ranch for years, every break from school I could get. Then in high school, I was lucky enough to meet up and go to work with Pearl Tompkins in Big Arm, Montana. Pearl Tompkins was one of the forefathers of the Tennessee walking horse breed in the Northwest. She was an old cowgirl. She used her walking horses around her ranch. And I would sit by the hour and listen to her talk as she'd just pitter around her farm, throwing alfalfa hay to all the horses. And anyway, so that's how I really got started in gaited horses. And yet, ironically, two of the very first horses I ever met when I went to this ranch I spent my life at in Stevensville, Montana, two of the first horses, which I think is this sort of almost an ironic start, where a black and a white horse, 32 years old, salt and pepper. And they were Tennessee walking horses. Meant nothing to me at the time. But I just kind of find it ironic that those are like two of the very first horses. So anyway, I've proceeded on. I love all horses. I trained up at a very wonderful farm in Calgary, Alberta, that raised Tennessee walking horses. And I was there for 8 years. Then I came to Pennsylvania to become a trainer at a walking horse pleasure farm. Show pleasure. Actually, that's probably very close to when I met Wendy, because I very shortly after that went to a centered riding clinic as a guinea pig. And since then, it's like everybody else, Wendy, that you've asked, how did you get started in this? Well, ironically, my walking horse couldn't canter. What is wrong with this horse? What's wrong with me? Guess what it ended up being? His feet.
Oh, wow.
How about that? Yep. I didn't like that answer, by the way. Peggy said, until you fix his back feet, that horse won't canter. And I'm thinking, I didn't drive an hour up here with my horse to be told you couldn't help me canter this horse. But guess what? That was right. Until his back feet got balanced, there was no way he could canter. He couldn't get his front end up off the ground. So anyway, I've followed since, and I'm very lucky to have colleagues and friends who are all of our passions are the whole horse, the well-being of a functional horse.
So Diane, let me just ask you a question, because I had no idea that there were Tennessee walkers in the Northwest, and we're going to say back in the 70s, 60s?
Yeah, that was back in 1971.
Yeah, late 60s, 70s. Because when I think of Tennessee walkers, I think of Tennessee, right? I spent time in Kentucky because I went to grad school at UK. So, I can remember going to some Tennessee walker shows and that sort of thing. But I had no idea that the breed itself had really expanded out of Tennessee. And so why it sounds like there was a fair number of Tennessee walkers in the Northwest.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely there were. And Oregon, the western part of Oregon was quite thick with walking horses especially, and the other smooth gaited breeds, infiltrated. But the walking horse was very popular in the Northwest. There were a lot of walking horse shows in the Northwest.
And were they used for cattle or pleasure or?
Good question. Actually, I knew several outfitters that went into the back country, Bob Marshall, Seeley, that used gaited mules and Tennessee walking horses in the Bob Marshall, several of them, Wendy. Good question. And I knew many people up in northern Montana who used the walking horse at the time for their ranch work. Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so gaited mules, they were crossing Tennessee walkers to get the gaited mules?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Back then, yes, that is correct.
So they would have been a fair-sized mule.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've seen one of those. All right, so somehow, and we don't quite have the history on that necessarily, the Tennessee Walker migrated from Tennessee into the Northwest and got utilized for lots of different things, and there were shows.
There were.
And
unfortunately back then, if you will, and other than salt and pepper, I'm going to horse shows as a kid before I actually was showing. The big lick, you know, the ones with the big icky stacks on. Oh, did I just show some prejudice? I think I
just mentioned it.
Okay.
But now you did.
I did, didn't I? Now, but ironic, and I find it intriguing as I think back on this. It is amazing. So we talked about that being the late 70s, actually early 70s. It was a completely, I'm not saying I advocate it, but it was a completely different look than what it is now.
Well, I agree with you, because when I was a kid growing up in Connecticut, we used to go up to the horse shows for 4-H, and then the state level, and going up to Yukon and then Eastern States, they had American saddlebreds. And they had 3-gated and 5-gated, and they were, you know, they were stacked, but none of this kind of aberrant type of, you know, that was just a bigger foot for a little more action. And that actually, Helen Crabtree, and I'm sure you know who Helen Crabtree is.
Oh, I rode, yes.
Did you ride with her?
I rode with her. She called me the little girl on the little horse.
Saddlebreds. She's just, I have her book, and she taught classical position, alignment, and gravity. And saddle seat back then was actually beautiful. It was really beautiful to watch. The horses had top lines. They were fit. They were, you know, beautifully turned out. And we used to go to the garden to watch the National Horse Show, and we'd always go on jumper night, but they'd always have a saddle seat final. And so we got to watch that. But I really have to say that the 60s and 70s, if anybody is old enough to remember, it's so different than what we're seeing today. I mean, horses were engaged. They didn't look like great, you know, German shepherds with their rear ends out behind them. It was a very different thing. And it's unfortunate that the whole shift in the gaited horse world became extreme, just as we've done in so many other disciplines. And so I'm not saying that no other discipline has become extreme, but it seems that we can't leave things alone, and we have to start messing with it. And the only way we can go is more and more to extremes. And that's what we see in all the disciplines, actually, whether it's the dressage, whether it's, you know, Western, whether it's reining, or gaited horses. We tend to leave the middle and go to the extremes, and then hopefully the pendulum swings back. But it seems to be that that's kind of what happened, because I remember seeing saddle seats, seeing saddlebreds, not really necessarily seeing a lot of Tennessee Walkers in my childhood, but the elegance of it, you know, it was really quite beautiful. And maybe you can talk to that a little bit while I read this comment that somebody's put in over here.
A long one. Thank you. You are so right. And Helen Crabtree, still, since deceased, of course, but she still upheld a balanced seat and a balanced horse. Yeah. And it actually broke her heart to see the stiffness be brought in, and the disregard to posture in the riders. And yes, we're all looking, we're not all, that's not true. And that's why I have so enjoyed your webinars, some of my colleagues, and I've spoken about everybody is truly looking for the well-being. How do we get to the well-being of the horse? And I don't know about you, Wendy, but I so find, and I say this to my students, you go to a horse show, which who wants to go to a horse show anymore? But you watch a saddlebred class or an equitation, saddle seat equitation class come into the ring, dressed to the nines. They used up their entire cosmetic case that day getting ready for the horse show. And they come in. And then all of a sudden, once in a while, you will see this entry come in the show ring, in the gate, and it flows. It just flows. And guess what? That's the rider who has a decent posture, and the horse, even though of course they're high-headed, but the high-headedness comes from telescoping,
Right.
And not from your favorite word, ventriflexing or inversion. It truly comes because the thoracic sling, the abs, have been able to lift the front end of the horse and allow this float. I mean, it's almost like a joke, because there's absolutely, and what does the judge do? What do? I've got all these other ones over here that look the same, and then I've got this one. And I think that is part of the dilemma or the challenge that we're up against in this horse world. In that people, but that's what I see. I can't ride my horse the way you're suggesting, because that's what I see. And I sure can't go in a show ring doing what you're suggesting, Diane, because I'll never place. So I will be less than beneficial to my horse so I can get a ribbon.
Or the other way is you don't go out in the show ring and you just, even though that's, I don't see showing as an adverse thing. I see showing as a way to figure out where we are in our training. It's, if you live in the closet, you can fool yourself into thinking that you're correct. But, that requires that we have judges that understand what good posture and good function is, that we reward people for presenting that. And that's a whole nother discussion that I think maybe sometime it'd be interesting to get a judge to come on the webinars and have a little discussion about that. And I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole tonight, because, we can see it in all disciplines. And that's my point, is that Arthur Cottis said it best to me. He said, there are good riders and bad riders. And he did not qualify breed, type, discipline, and there are good trainers and bad trainers. And he made it so simple that, when we see people that are doing things that are less than optimum, that aren't considering the horse's posture, I always have to think, I'm hoping that they're lacking information. And if they had that information, they could make a good choice. But you cannot choose if you don't have the information. And if you're, I've seen this so many times. Like, I had a client, and his daughter wanted to ride in a particular discipline. And I watched from a distance, trying to advise them, go down the rabbit hole of buying the lame horse and then being sold, then they had to get rid of the lame horse and buy another lame horse because it was disreputable, the bottom line. And I could tell, but how could I help them? Because I wasn't their trainer. I wasn't their instructor, and that's a statement on the industry as a whole that we need to address as a larger question of how do we bring accountability and credibility back into the industry. But again, that leads us into a whole nother discussion. And I think tonight we want to focus on what is it, and on your, I haven't looked at your PowerPoint, but what your presentation is, because, and I think with gaited horses, we get into this discussion so much more rapidly, partly because of the media attention on some of the things going on in the gaited horse world. Not that we shouldn't have attention on that, but what I find is that when we put an emotional attachment on it, we act emotionally. And so much of this has to be done in a rational way, because it will not get done if we react emotionally. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
I will, thank you. And that's why I so appreciate you, because everybody, if you've been watching Wendy's webinars, and I even heard her say it a couple times, I want to keep these webinars kind of a scientific or things that have been researched and such. And yet she was willing to kind of open up and do almost what I'm going to call an umbrella topic. And on my PowerPoint, we're going to talk about some specifics. We can't talk about every breed. So I appreciate you doing that because yes, Wendy, there is truth and research and logic to maintaining well-being. And something I'd like to slip back to for a minute, we talked about, and I have nothing against showing either, by the way. It's just difficult to watch sometimes. You know, when I first moved to Pennsylvania, I moved to work as a trainer at a brand new gaited horse facility. And they bought me my my pleasure walking horse. They bought me my heavy shod walking horse. And I'd go out, and not often did I not place in a class of horses. But I'm so proud of this, very seldom did I win. But you want to know what's cool about, and I think this supports and will do your heart good, is that's actually where I got most of my clients. They would come to the trailer after the class and they'd go, yours, that's how I want a horse to go. In other words, they wanted the one whose tail was wagging and they were going, hi, mom, hi, mom. And that's not true. My horses were very well trained and they were great horses, but they were relaxed and they didn't look like their eyes were going to pop out of their eyeballs. And so there are people out there looking for that. And that goes right back to what you said, and that's what I hope to do tonight, Wendy, is allow some truth and information that's just down to earth truth about a well horse. And it isn't about the fact that they are a smooth gaited horse. I want so much to let people, and I'm talking about professionals also here, by the way, realize that every breed of smooth gaited horse that we could list, and we have a slide here later, I promise we do, Wendy, you'll find it. The last word is horse. Affecting your high CPU. I don't know what that means.
Okay. Yeah, the computer's struggling a little bit, and your audio just went a little fuzzy, but hopefully it'll settle.
Okay. And so I hope that I can bring some allowance to people that have been told because it's a walking horse, you have to wear this bit, and because it's a Rocky Mountain horse, you have to use this bit, and the Missouri Foxtrotters have a bit you have to use. They're individual horses, and the basic truth is the basic truth. And we'll talk about the genetic side of that. That'll be my scientific offering to you, Wendy. But there is a genetic truth that has been researched, but they're horses. And yes, I hope that we can help to let people feel comfortable and realize that they can work with their gaited horse, whatever breed, as a horse. And when you find a informed, knowledgeable professional, and I'm talking farrier, trimmer, vet, chiropractor, massage therapist, instructor, trainer, if they're informed about the well-being of a horse, they can help you.
You bring up a super point though, and because so often I have people, I never want to show again. And what you just said, if there is no example of a content horse on the show circuit, then no one will ever see it, and they'll just take what's out there as what it has to be. And so, that you put yourself out as an example, and you said it, you got business because people came to you, they recognized the quality difference. And so that's what attracted them. And, you know, when I had Jillian Benyon on, he was formerly of Cavalia. And that was the thing about his Liberty workshop, was that the quality was so different. The horses were loose, and we see lots of people do Liberty, but it was the relationship and the connection with the horse that was so different. And if you don't have the opportunity to see that, if we all just say, well, I'm just going to hang up the show world, even if we like showing and our horse likes, because a lot of horses like showing, then
Yes,
where's the example for people to know there's a choice? And so, you know, that's really great for you to bring up, because it doesn't mean you have to run out and show because you show one thing, you know, and you want people to see it. But if that's your nature, that you like showing, there's no reason not to do it. And because if you're doing it for the ribbon, then, you know, that's kind of a whole different idea. But if you're doing that to present your horse and what you and your horse have together, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And we do need samples. And you know, Wendy, ironically, I might like to add to that, it's not just in the show ring. Yep. Because unfortunately, and I'm waiting for that to come up here on the chat list, actually, well, I was just told on Sunday, I think it was, that a very awesome traveling clinician commented on how she didn't like, I think it was just walking horses, of course, but because they were klutzy and stupid. But guess what? That's not true.
No.
And so I'm thinking about, not only in the show ring, can all of us, all of you out there, take the well-being and help your horses become more sound, more well, more healthy, more functional. You'll take a horse out on the trail and they'll go zipping over tree roots and around rocks, and people go, "Oh, I didn't know gaited horses could do that. I thought you had to keep them on a paved road." No, just some of the information that we have been given. And what right do we have to question it? The person that gave me the information is a professional instructor, or they've had horses forever. They have to, even though it seems wrong to me, they have to know better than me. No, we treat and manage all of these gaited, the smooth gaited, Wendy likes to call them the soft gaited, some people call them the ambling horses. If we allow them to be in a healthy posture, they're going to show off all over the place. So show ring, trail, it doesn't make any difference.
All right, shall we dive into your PowerPoint here?
Let's dive.
Okay. So I'm going to run
the
screen for Diane because we were really concerned about her her connection. She's out in the boonies.
I think I talked off Wendy last night because, well, I'm not computer literate.
It's okay, we got there.
So that's just obviously, yeah, we did. Here we are. So that's just an opening. There is where you can get a hold of me. Please, you're welcome to do so. That can come back up if anybody wants to get that.
Yep.
So we're going to screen number 2. I'm trying to look at mine. And even though that's a distant picture, I hope that everybody can see 5 horses out there. Well, I could point to them, but you couldn't see me point to them, so I won't. But
hey, we've got 5
there's
horses.
a little white horse, and I don't think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are. And guess what? This is kind of one of my fun topics. They're all gaited horses. Because guess what? If a horse didn't gait, it'd fall over. Every horse gaits. And that's why it's kind of fun, interesting, how we try to put a cover name onto the horses who have been lucky enough to be mutated. Isn't that an awful word? We are mutated. So on the left, even though it's not up close, but just for the fun of it, on the left, the little white one, that's Mr. Bug, and he's a spotted saddle horse. The gray horse is an Azteca. So he's the one that didn't get mutated. And then we've got two black horses there. The one that you were pointing at just there is a 5-year-old Tennessee walking horse gelding. The one with her hiney end to us is a probably 15 or 18-year-old Tennessee walking horse mare. And then the one who's front and center looking, are you getting my picture, is a 29-year-old Rocky Mountain horse.
Oh.
So I thought it would be fun to say that because, again, I really do look at all horses as being gaited. I found that very, very fun. So, Wendy, would you like to go on to the next slide, please, unless you have something to ask or add?
How many gaited horse breeds have been identified?
God, I wish she could wait till I got further. Ironically,
okay, never mind if you answer that question.
No, it's okay, because actually it comes up here. I love this slide. There have been 68 breeds that have shown indications to a possibility of having a smooth gait to them, but those are hit and miss. There have been over 30 who have been identified as carrying a gaited gene, some that are double, so they almost without fail gait, and some that can go back and forth between a 4-beat gait or possibly a trot. Our gaited Morgans, our gaited quarter horses, our gaited Arabs. So no, that was a good question. But I like this slide, and this Dr. Gus Cothran, you can look him up. He has a lot. If you are more interested in truly studying about why our wonderful smooth gaited horses gait, he has a lot of information out. He's at Texas A&M. I have a couple other names that I can give you for those of you that want to do more research. But again, tonight we're doing a more general umbrella look. But what I find fun, and actually, Wendy, you just had Deb Davies on a couple times ago, and she talked about the she's going to get mad at me here. The CPGs, which kind of goes down into his last talk. But so all horses have a DMRT3 gene. Goes through their spinal cord. The spinal cord is so important. The spine is so important. And then a fact, ladies and gentlemen, is that what the spine does is what allows the limbs or the legs to do. So a healthy, free-flowing spine will allow the gait that horse is, I'm going to use the word wired to do, it will allow it to come into their legs. So in the last, gaitedness is a trait that naturally occurs in all horses, but many breeds have been developed for a specific speed or gait, Cothran explained. So then our last one is about our smooth gaited breeds. The team sequenced the DMRT3 gene of the test horses. They did thousands, by the way. I think they had well, that's not thousands, but they had like well over 1,000 horses in this study around the world, by the way. That almost every case of gaited horses, there was a mutation. I just love that. We're mutated. There was a mutation in the DMRT3 that caused a premature stop codon. It's not that big. All codon is, everybody, it's part of the genetic makeup, the DNA. which causes the protein product of the gene to be terminated before the whole protein is completed. This alters the function of the protein, which leads to the differences associated with gait.
So it's actually a protein that's, if you will, deficient that creates gait.
We're mutated, we're deficient. Yes.
Well, I mean, if it stopped,
yes,
then it didn't keep going into what
Correct.
would be the three-gated horse
Correct.
genome or
Yes.
protein.
Yes.
So it's a protein. That's fascinating.
It is so intriguing. I mean, obviously this would be a whole nother, I mean, it's a complete study in it.
We think of gait being a motor pattern that's in the brain, like learning to ride a bicycle is stored in the cerebellum. So you think of the gait as a motor pattern, but really it's a spinal cord pattern that is affected by a change in the gene that has a change in a protein. Is that right?
Yes. And if I may, yes, in the perfect world, yes, Professor Murdoch, that is correct. But you know as well as I do that if that sequence or that wiring is not allowed to flow and work efficiently, the spinal column will get affected, and then the brain will pick up a different habit.
Right.
And so the body can very quickly become habitual in how it's moving.
And conversely, you could take a three-gated horse with back pain and turn it into a gated horse.
Here. Oh, yes. And do we not see that way too much?
Well, it's interesting because my horse Al, he's a Clyde thoroughbred cross, and when I got him at 3.5, his neck stuck up like a post, right? And he has an 18-inch overtrack. He literally overtracks 18 inches hindfoot to front foot print. And so when his neck was stuck up in the air, he paced. But when he let his neck go, he walks. And I have to be so careful who I put on him, because if they tighten a hip, he paces. You know?
Absolutely.
Yep, instant.
And, you know, because of the difficulty that we had getting pictures back and forth, I chose not to include the videos that I had taken.
Yeah.
Because sadly, one of the most common beliefs, and I don't mean to be, I want to keep this a positive progression, but again, that is certainly one of the very, very common trainings in the gaited horse world, that the horse has to have their head up to gait, that the gait is in the mouth. I was flat out told by a very wonderful person that my racking horse, who's passed on, some of you on here would have known Dandy, he could rack a little hole in the wall and harrow my arena for me at the same time. I mean, his nose could be on the ground. Why? Because he also had the support from his hind legs to lift his thoracic up and let him move those little legs. So that's a very sad piece of, as you said, misinformation.
Well, I think we just need to be clear that the postural position of what is often called ventriflexion, which is actually extension in the back or a hollow back, isn't required for gait. Gait's a genetic trait, and we can our horses will be healthier if they gait from their genetics rather than from a fixed postural position. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Absolutely. And you know what I love about this so far, Wendy, is we might as well just throw the rest of the PowerPoint out.
No,
no, we won't. But you just bring up such passionate things to me about the truth of any horse, just like you talked about your horse. Yes, when allowed into a balanced posture, the horse will do what its genetics tell it to do. Now, I was supposed to be a model. You see, I really was. Should I stand up?
No, I know how tall you are.
So we're going to have horses have the gait in them, but they are mutated with the stop code. It doesn't mean that that horse is maybe necessarily going to become a world champion pleasure horse in the show ring. But they can certainly be the best that they are and have a wonderful gait to just wander down the trail or be out on the farm or be in a what we call a country pleasure class in the FOSS shows, which are very much about the well-being and the correct posture of a horse.
And FOSS stands for Friends of Sound Horses.
Very good. Yes.
I wrote articles for their magazine for many years.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I am very aware of that. Thank you. So you went back. You know what? Why don't we go on?
Yeah.
To the next.
I do have oh, this is awesome.
Good.
I do have another question. It's so much fun to talk to you because I can ask these questions. And what is the earliest recorded gaited horse in history?
I love it when people ask. I didn't know that. I just looked at that, and I'm not going to be able to answer that question.
But
Maybe somebody.
It's a long time, right? Gaited horses have actually.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, like totally. Roughly. Just give us a rough. Were they there, in Xenophon's time, or were they identified? Because half of it is, were they actually even identified?
I believe that is something that has been documented, if you will. That probably even back to Xenophon's time, yes. And if there's somebody out there, like if Elise is on or anybody, they know the answer to that.
Okay, so if you know the answer to that question, just type it in the chat or put it in the
and I will find it out. But yes, absolutely, Wendy. It was not uncommon at all for horses to have a single foot gait or a little amble. It just was absolutely not even thought about. It was just what the horses did. And they were using horses. And so those were preferred horses by a lot of people. And so, yes, that's a very good question. CK, I'm trying to get, there we go. Okay. So what we have there, obviously, is a list of many of the various gaited horses. Now, as I said, there are over 30 noted gaited horses that carry the stop codon, the gait gene. And I'm curious, if anybody out there has something that's not on this list. I have the most common ones, but if anybody has another gaited horse out there that's not on this list, it would be fun if you would put it into the chat, I guess, huh, Wendy? I was very surprised, actually, that the Haflinger was not on the list of some gaited. In that I have worked with 3 Haflingers who absolutely, in a nice posture, with feet that are, nicely trimmed, they're not, they're good, that will carry off into a little amble, a little single foot. And they can carry it. It's not like they stumble into it for a minute. They can carry that gait for quite a while.
You have a few on here that I have never heard of. Particularly, I can use my pointer. So if you look at the screen, I don't even know how to pronounce this one.
The Penia?
Yeah.
And he is he's a Greek horse. There's actually 3 that are from Greek, a couple from Crete. It's interesting. They're all over the world these gaited horses.
So this one here, how do you pronounce this? I don't
even know. Crete horse. The Masara is a Crete horse.
And then
the Hokkaido, he is from Japan. Well, Hokkaido, obviously.
I thought it was like Japanese. There's a gaited horse in Japan?
Yes, and their feet are really little. No, anyway, I think it even sounds Japanese. I love that, the Hokkaido. It sounds Japanese. Most of these horses, by the way, that are odd names that we aren't familiar with, most of them do a very non-spectacular, but just a cute little 4-beat, almost shuffle or amble. So they're a very preferred horse for working, and that's what they're for working, for pleasure.
Can you define amble?
An amble is a little 4-beat, non-energy excited movement. It's just a 4-beat where they just kind of roll along.
So it'd be a nice trail gait.
Awesome trail gait, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I have to ask you about tiger horse. Where's that from?
The tiger horse is an American horse.
Oh, never heard of it.
It's a cute horse, and they are one of the breeds. So here we have, I don't know, there's fewer than 30 here, but there's quite a few of them on there. And as I said, they actually noted 68 horses in the study. I believe there's 140 recognized horse breeds in the world. 68 of those, some would actually show the potential to have some gaited in them, but not steady enough to truly call them mutated as a gaited horse, a smooth gaited horse. Over 30 they are mutated. They have that stop codon. The IJA, our Judges Association in Foch, has 15 breeds in our rule book who have their own rules, and one of them is the tiger horse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so.
And then the Arabian actually has that stop codon?
Some of them do, absolutely, yes. And actually, when I was doing competitive trail riding, it wasn't common, but it wasn't what I would call uncommon, to see an Arab go, off in their beautiful floating trot, and then to pass them at another time when they were letting the horse kind of amble to change, because guess what? It lets different muscles be used. It actually allows the horse's body a chance to rest some muscles, use other muscles. It's brilliant. But yes, it's not an uncommon thing in Arabians. And Wendy, I still want to go back to what you said. Ladies and gentlemen, what Wendy said is so important.
What did I say?
You actually said something really important.
Okay.
Is that we owe it to our horses to learn what a good posture is. Because just because the horse has their head in the air and maybe is doing a little broken trot or a broken pace or a pace does not mean it is a meant to 4-beat gait horse and we're actually being detrimental to their well-being. And that's a huge difference, if you will.
It's one that's difficult for if you don't know what to look for. It's for a lot of lesser experienced horse owners that don't know what to look for. They don't realize that they're looking at poor posture versus conformation, and so that does.
I have something for that.
Okay, great. So before we get there, I have one more on here I want to ask you about. I can't pronounce it. I can't pronounce
it either.
It's
they're from Germany. Of
How
course.
do you say that?
I don't know. You said no. It's Eigendein Burger.
Eigendein Burger.
Eigendein Burger. Yep.
So there are gaited horses all around the world. Japan is a shocker. It's a surprise. And it would make sense that if there's gaited horses in Greece and Crete, then there would have been gaited horses most likely for a very long time.
Exactly.
Because that would make sense to, if they were going to go do conquests and things, wouldn't it be a whole lot easier on these guys riding without saddles to ride a gaited horse than a trot?
Here. Listen to Wendy. She's very smart. Absolutely. And that's why they were very prized, as I said. Not even thought about, but I get that horse today because they were easier to ride for sure.
Oh, and somebody's saying the Marwari?
The Marari? Mm-hmm.
Marari
they
is
have
from northern India.
Yes, those are from India. Where is he?
He's up here.
Yes, he's from India. That's correct. We have him, of course, the United States, Germany, India, Spain, Brazil, Crete, India, Brazil, Japan, Greece. Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
And since, of course, then, so Germany actually has a horse that originated over there and is bred over there. It's amazing, though, how many of the various gaited breeds in the United States and Canada have been transported over and are now, used for breeding stock to get the more popular, the more well-known United States and Canadian gaited breeds overseas. Yes. Okay. Very cool. Yep. Very good. So, I think I'd like to say, and we'll probably go into more depth, but you said such a true thing. Let me tell you a very sad truth. When I got my first judge's license, which, by the way, at that time was with the Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders and Exhibitors Association, which is the father of support, of the big lick horse, and also the plantation shod, meaning heavy metal shoes with long toes and low heels, and pleasure horses. It's amazing that I got a license because they'd say, "Do you see what we're looking at, Diane?" And you know what my answer was? "Oh, yes." I didn't have a clue what I was, and I was out judging horses. Isn't that sad? Very sad. So here's something that I can share with you about every single horse in the world. When a horse is free moving through their spine and in some form, if you will, of self-carriage, at the walk, they will have oscillation to their whole spine. So when we watch our gaited horses at the walk, and also it's also true in all of the 4-beat gaits, and in walk, trot, and canter, there will be a slight, at least in a walking horse, it's going to be wonka, wonka. In a warm blood, it's going to be wonka. I bet your horse goes like this, Wendy, when you're walking it. Hi, hi. So in your longer strided horses, you're going to have quite a beautiful flow of a left and a right through the spine. And it comes right on out through the neck and right up to the top of the head. That is one of the first things, and an easy thing to start to train your eye for, everybody. That's really easy. And I'm also going to share another piece of information, and I think my friend up there, I think it's gone off the chat now, about my observation of horses' movement. The best vantage point to watch a horse walk, to see if they are in a
4-beat balanced movement is behind, about at the 3/4 mark, from behind, not from the side, but where you can actually observe the shoulders and the hindquarters moving. Because from that vantage point, you'll actually see the shoulder move, and then you'll see the hindquarters move, and you can still see the oscillation through the whole spine, on out the neck, over there, out the pole, and off to the next place on the trail. So those are some things. I know it does take an eye, Wendy. It does take practice. But there are some simple things, if you will, to look. And number one is that oscillation. That's life-giving. It keeps the internal organs healthy. And it allows for the gait that individual horse got mutated for, the stop codon. Sadly, and some people are probably going like, but I've been told I was one of them. But you don't want your horse's neck and head to go left and right. Why? Because they're pacing. If a horse is pacing, their neck and head are going, the whole body is falling from side to side. It's falling, it's collapsing from side to side. It's not being carried with 4 legs, 4/4, and a healthy rib cage and spinal column. How's that? Does that give a different vision?
Well, it just, it fits with the whole idea that of flow through the body, whether that's fascia, whether that's movement, it's a whole body function. And when we have stiffness, it looks like bits and pieces, and you don't see that flow. What I always find, and this is one of the things I find so fascinating with Surefoot, is I'll watch a horse move, and then I'll start using Surefoot with the horse. And then I'll be saying to myself, what was that like before? Because it's moving now, and I can't remember what it was like. And it's often because our eye is attracted to movement, and we don't see what's not moving until it then starts to move. So many people might look at their horse and think everything's okay because they're used to seeing parts of the body not move, such as the back. And then when it does start to move, it's a surprise. It's like, wait a second, I don't remember seeing that. It's kind of like, when a horse sheds in the spring and you find old scars and you're like, I don't remember seeing those on my horse in the wintertime. It's because the hair covered them up, right? And it's kind of the same thing that because our eye is attracted to movement, a lot of times we don't realize something isn't moving.
Exactly. And we have to be given the permission to realize that it moves. And you take me to another place with that. We do have written dressage tests for gaited horses. As a matter of fact, I will say we actually, the very first competitive dressage tests were written in Canada, in Alberta, for Tennessee walking horses. And we actually had the first judged by licensed dressage judges gaited dressage shows in Alberta, which I was lucky enough to show in for the first 3 years before I moved to the States. We have and now of course all the breeds take part, it's very popular. But here comes one of the things that I'm kind of a black sheep for, Wendy, and it's not the only thing, by the way, but what you will hear quite often is, well, how can a judge, say, a Tennessee walking horse up against a Pasofino? Or, I don't know how to judge. I don't know anything about smooth-gaited horses. I'm a dressage judge. I judge warm bloods and thoroughbreds. Guess what? What you just said is so important. Healthy, functional movement through the body is healthy functional movement. So let's say I take a Tennessee walking horse into a dressage ring. His gait's going to be like your guy. You know, we're going to have 10 to 18 inches over stride, and it's going to be a long ka-thunk, ka-thunk, because the Tennessee Walker's signature gait is nothing more than a lengthened walk. That's all it is. That's all it is. And so if my horse is performing a running walk properly, the judge looks at the movement of the body, the flow, the carriage. And then let's say, actually a pleasure path, let's say a shorter stride, and let's take a Rocky Mountain horse, comes into the show ring. If his body is in balance and self-carriage, it doesn't make any difference what the footfall is, because the footfall will be correct, just as you said a bit ago. The spine dictates the footfall. Yeah. But that judge should be able to go, oh, look at that nice flow. Look at the telescoping to that neck. And look at the nice swing or oscillation to how the tail comes out of the hiney end. So you kind of opened that one. I hate to tell you.
So somebody said, somebody's asked, they have 2 Arabian standardbred crosses alongside mares, a trotter and a pacer, gradually move differently by their 3rd year. Do you find that foals like this generally do not regain the ability to gait even with training? And I guess I'm a little confused by the question, because it sounds like she has foals that are the Arab standardbreds, and that they're losing what gait they saw as a foal.
No, that gait is wired in there. It is absolutely findable. It can come back to the surface as long as what we do as far in like equipment, if the saddle fits, and if we let them develop a good balanced walk, which is the base to all, then yes, I absolutely believe that those horses can find their smooth gait again. And ironically, even though obviously not all Arabs are gaited, but there is, and it kind of goes back to your question. Think about how old the Arab is, Wendy. It's an old breed. So both of those breeds, certainly the standardbred, but of course some of them are very strong trotters. Some of them have the pace gene in them. I think they very likely can refine a smooth gait for you. Yes, I do.
And I would think that, you know, growth spurts have influence on gait, just as I've seen growth spurts have influence on gait.
How old are they now?
She didn't say.
Okay.
Or maybe she did.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a good thing I got you along.
Their 3rd year, so you could be dealing with a growth spurt.
Yeah. And you know what? You spoke about this on one of your webinars. First of all, I suggest we allow these young horses to mature more before we get on them. Because if we start riding them at 2 years of age, 3 years of age, we are riding them in a body that is not ready to be weight bearing. They aren't even sure how their own body moves. So we can quite likely create a negative movement in them, like an on the forehand movement, which then we would have to help them rebalance, and then the gait will flow back in. So yes, you're right. Age is huge. Age is huge. And a lot of the gaited breeds, well, a lot of breeds do not mature until they're much older. And a lot of the gaited breeds, 6 years of age, they still are in
her talk on Monday talks about when horses mature. So, oh no, they're aged now. They're not from 97 and 98.
Oh, Like me.
But Martina's webinar is a really good one to listen to if you're thinking about, how early you should start your horse. She has a lot of information there about what's happening in the growth and in the spine and in the joints. So that would be a really good webinar for anybody who has young horses.
And yes. And so my support to you in your question is that if you will allow your horses to release and find, and maybe you can answer this question, whoever asked about the Arab standard bred crosses. I can't see the names, ironically, they're in a light blue. If you let them reestablish that oscillation that I spoke about, and as long as there's no damage in the spinal column at this stage of the game, it can flow back in.
All right.
It's kind of ironic what you talked about. Can we look at the feet, please? Unfortunately, let's look at the feet. Go back down. Okay. Go up, I should say, up above the equipment. There you go. Because Wendy, you talking about your sure foot, and it's funny. The first time I saw you do the sure foot, by the way, was at Lorney's.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and before I even had thought about that myself, I used blocks of wood. But I'm not as smart as you to do what you did. That was brilliant. But the reason I think that what you talked about with the surefoot and bringing it into the smooth gaited breed talk specifically is until we make sure. So you could put a walking horse or any gaited horse up on the surefoot pads. And they might create a little like, it might create a shift. However, that being said, our responsibility as the owner, and I guess I'm going to put the responsibility over onto our farriers and onto our veterinarians and anybody who guides and gives information to those of us that have horses. This foot on the left, the top left foot, the black foot, that is a very, very common foot seen on many of the modern day gaited breeds. We will not do justice to your surefoot pads, Wendy, until our horse looks like the one in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yes, and sometimes, and this is what I've found, is that even if the horse is poorly shod or long toe, low heel, like in the upper left, and is not ideal, it still offers, I've seen it create changes in horses where it changes relationship, and I've seen it guide owners into understanding that they need to make a change to balance a foot.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And as long, you just said it, as long as they realize a change is needed.
Yeah, because surefoot's not going to solve a problem like that horse on the upper left. Surefoot's not designed, it's not intended, but I have seen it bring comfort to horses where suddenly they go from grumpy to interacting, which is such a change in personality that it allows people to start thinking differently about the horse. But I totally agree with you. I mean, there's sometimes that I look down and I'm like, until you change the feet, this is just a Band-Aid on a very big hole.
And let's also go to a fact which is also going to be lower. But if we have a horse with a foot like that, they're probably going to do some kind of a gait, by the way, some kind of a discombobulated gait. But they are so down behind the wither and so heavy on the forehand that it puts us out of whack, first of all, because we can't sit in balanced posture on that, but we certainly can we can certainly compensations, can't we, for that? But again, the way that a horse is wired to move healthy and coordinated is to be able to come up in the front end to give the hind ends a place to come forward. So when we have a horse, these are front feet, the black ones up in the left-hand corner, those are front feet. The hind legs or the hind quarters on any horse, I don't care what breed it is, the back and the hind quarters have got to compensate in a way to get around those front feet, because those front feet can't get off the ground until tomorrow. One of the examples of that, which is not something I necessarily, if you've never seen it, I don't suggest you go look at it, but the reason the big lick Tennessee walking horses, and some of you know what I'm talking about, but they're horses that carry a very big, what we call pack, you just stack up to 5 inches heavy. And when you watch them from behind, their hind legs go way to the outside of their front legs. Why? Because the front feet don't get off the ground as fast as the hind legs have to move to carry the person on top of them. So we want to use the Surefoot pads. What a wonderful gift to have those to help rehab these horses that have been so stoic. And you talked about personality, Wendy. That is actually what first drew me to, it was Tennessee walking horses. That's what I had when I went to Pearl Tompkins. She had over 50 head of Tennessee walking horses. Their personality. That's actually what drew me into the walking horse world, was their personality. They're funny, they're kind, but sadly that creates them to be very stoic and very martyred. You put them on the Surefoot, like you said, and they go, oh, thank you. And we start to see the life come to them. And then it's our responsibility to turn their front feet into the ones that are in the bottom right-hand corner.
It doesn't matter what breed, you need a balanced foot.
That is correct. And I'm going to go back again. I will tell you what, please, people, go back. Wendy, you have had some of the most amazing, brilliant presenters. And just when I write to a friend and say, oh, you've got to watch his presentation, 3 days later, another hoof presentation? Oh my God. And anything that is said by anyone that Wendy has had on regarding feet applies to every one of our smooth-gaited horses. Yeah. Every one of them.
Yeah, there's a myth that you have to shoe horses differently to gait. If gait is genetic, then that is false.
However, Wendy, this is all your fault. But thank you for bringing that up too. When horses, and whoever the person was that asked about the Arab standard bred cross, thank you. Because what starts to happen if these smooth-gaited horses quit gaiting, guess what we do? Or we don't. Guess what's not uncommon? Well, if we put a heavier shoe on, or we change the angle of the foot, or you pull his head up a little higher, you will be able, and they'll put him out of enough balance that the horse has to scramble and do some kind of a gait. Yes. Balanced, with a balanced foot, a healthy balanced foot, they can present to you the genetic gait they were born with. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So you go on down onto the equipment. So another very interesting part of the gaited horse world is equipment. So here I just took a picture of two of what I like to ride my gaited horses in. I either ride in that their Western saddle, or if I'm drinking tea, I ride in the one on the right. I don't care what saddle you ride your gaited horse in, except what? It has to fit. Doesn't it make any difference if it honks? If it's a Wendy's saddle, it's a plantation saddle. But a saddle must allow for the movement of the rib cage, the movement of the hindquarters, and the movement of the shoulders. Raise your hand how many of you ran out and bought a gaited horse saddle for your horse. One of the brilliant things, ironically, that the gaited horse movement of making gaited horse saddles did is, ironically, most of them added flair to the front of the saddle, which is a positive thing. Flair at the front of the saddle lets the shoulders move, yeah, if it's the right size. But guess what? Even Wendy's horse has to move his shoulders. So he also needs a saddle that allows his shoulders to move. So my warning or my suggestion is, if it's a gaited horse saddle, that's fine, but it still has to fit your horse. And I guarantee you that not every Rocky Mountain horse, not every Mangalarga Marchador or Marari is built the same. We must make sure that the equipment allows the horse to be comfortable. I also just lined up a few bits. There's a simple little short shanked Western bit there. And guess what? That's a halter hanging there from that saddle. Yeah, I ride my horses in a halter a lot. I love riding in a halter. And then I have a little Kimberwick and I have a snaffle. I'm pointing to it like you guys can see me. The one hanging off of my English saddle is the bit that I use the majority of the time.
Looks like a miler.
It's a little miler comfort snaffle. It works really good for me. And I find that most horses are quite comfortable in it. But ironically, it works for me. And that's important. You have to be comfortable with it. So what this goes to show you, everybody, is that, or what my desire to have you understand, is you do not need a 10-inch shank walking horse bit. The Tennessee walking horse has their own bit. No, they're a horse, and they have teeth. And they need a bit, if you choose to use a bit, that's comfortable for them to carry, that they can reach into and still have movement. The Missouri Foxtrotter, it's a kind of a tradition to ride them in those aluminum bits that you make toilet paper holders with, like the ones that come on all the little pony bits. Those are a very popular Missouri Foxtrotter bit. They say that makes them gait better. That aluminum makes them gait better. The Pasafinos have beautiful bits that are traditional to their breed. But I do guarantee you on crossing my heart, that the bit, as long as it's a comfortable bit for the horse, bit does not make the gait. And there are many articles, there's many articles and training information out there saying that the gait is in the mouth. No, it's in the body. It's in the spine. So, no questions on that. So we can go on to the next one. Nutrition. There's a multifaceted reason why I brought the nutrition into this with the smooth-gaited breeds. Number one, we've already talked about the overall well-being of the horse, whether it be a Wackaloosa, a Tiger horse, or a Park Clydesdale. If they are comfortable, they will do their best. And if their internal system is supported with good nutrition, they'll be able to perform more like an athlete. They'll feel better. A lot of our smooth-gaited breeds, not all of them, everybody, not all of them by any means, but it's not uncommon that many of the, especially the American or the North American gaited breeds, have a propensity towards insulin resistance and Cushing's. It's just not uncommon. And I dare say every one I have does, even my 5-year-old. Well, we didn't think horses got Cushing's or insulin resistance at that age. Now that I know a little bit more, I am already feeding him as an insulin-resistant horse. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see how that pans out in his future. But down at the bottom, right, I have up the free choice mineral feeders. I hope you can see that. There's a whole line up there. And if we happen to have horses, that's Mr. Bug, that's the little spotted saddle horse. As they start to rewire themselves to a healthier movement, they need nutrients to feed their neurological system. When we offer a free choice system, the horse can choose what minerals might best serve that day for what that horse is going through. And I really hope there's nobody out there that has this situation. But if we have a horse who has been ridden in an inverted posture where the spine has gotten depressed down, neck up, it has likely created inflammation and likely shut down some of the proprioceptors in the body. So sometimes certain minerals are needed to help kick that back in. And a lot of times even just vitamin C itself is a help to tell the neurological system, the wiring system, wake up, we're going to come back to life now. Come on, just like putting them on the Surefoot pads and seeing their eyes go, oh. So that's why I wanted to put that up there, because it can be incredibly awesome to helping a horse reestablish their internal flora and their nutritional balance. So, okay, how are we doing? That's just a picture of a beautiful horse that I thought we should have a moment to look at. Look at that walk. Look at that walk. That is in that horse. Look at the height of her wither. Look at, she's actually, even in that snow, you can see that she's probably got both hind feet, or the one might be just coming forward, but she's supported behind and lifting up and proceeding on, who knows where she's going. So anyway, I just thought that was a nice picture to show. We've talked about some of this already, but I wanted to specifically bring up 3, I'm going to call them disciplines, things we do usually with horses. And I'm wondering how many people right now are going, is she crazy? You can't lunge a gaited horse. She's crazy. If we lunge with the awareness of allowing oscillation while on the lunge line, lunging is a completely acceptable and beneficial exercise. And it can be absolutely awesome for horses. Oh, this I would actually even go with. I'm curious about those Arab standardbred crosses. I wonder if they're trotting or pacing. They're probably trotting. But if you take a horse that has gone to the side of paciness, where the legs on one side move at the same time, watch it from the 3/4 line, everybody. Lunging them over ground poles is one of the easiest exercises for them to help rewire that system without us on their back. You know, give them the opportunity to find that 4-beat or diagonal movement when you're just out there coaching them and allowing them to find that.
And I think something people need to realize is anytime you are on the ground and there is a line or even an invisible line between you and the horse, you are lunging. You know, so many people look at someone with a lunge line and a lunge whip and say, you know, that's lunging, but then they don't see someone with a long lead to a halter as lunging. But it's all, anytime the horse is going around you, basically, that's lunging.
And Wendy, I love what you just said, because that takes me down. Don't worry, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's so important what you just said. The horse going around me at the end of even just the lead rope is lunging, and that's the best place to start lunging, by the way. Well, no, it's best to be up even closer. But we need to make sure that we are allowing the horse, no matter what distance they are from us, to lift up the front end, to lift the thoracic sling and the withers, and oscillate. And then lunging becomes a beneficial exercise. And you saying, I just loved your words, if they're just spinning around us, wow, 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 I guarantee you that we are wiring negatively into that horse. And we want to allow them to come up in the front end instead. So thank you for saying that, yes. Driving, by the way, when you go back through some of these breeds, that even some of the ones you asked the questions about, they're very commonly used for driving. They actually were bred, they kept strengthening the gene in that breed for driving. So, and they're wonderful. You can drive. Driving is a great thing. That's a lot of fun. I love fun. It's fun, fun.
Yeah, you haven't mentioned this yet, and I just wanted to point it out that all gait, smooth gait, is a variation on walk.
Bingo. Thank you. I wanted you to get something to say. But you're right. Yeah. No, it is. Thank you. And Wendy, you can take it to the bank, what she just said. It is true. Every one of the intermediate, if you will, that's kind of the term, mountain pleasure gait, running walk, Missouri foxtrot,
rack.
The rack, they are a offshoot. They are a continuation of the walk. The walk, in Dr. Debs Bennett's language, is an isochronal movement. It means it's an evenly spaced gait. And yes, if we are able to help our horses, or not impede our horses from doing and getting stronger and stronger at a walk, You're right. That gene will pop in and they will do their gait, Wendy. You're absolutely right.
Well, sometimes people think gait is some, because some of them are so fast, you can't really see with the naked eye that you're really looking at a walk. And anything other than a pace or a flying pace is, the word pace means lateral pair of legs. So it nullifies that from a gait. But and I remember in Dr. Clayton's book, she had the biomechanics of the horse. She had a list of all the names of the different gaits. And there's it was like a list of like 30 names, but they're all still a variation on walk.
Yes, they are. And which brings me to something else, which I would have gone with riding, but this is a great time. So we talked about riding horses when, like you said, Wendy, they're still out of balance. They can't even carry themselves functionally, let alone weight bear a human being and a saddle.
Yep.
Another very taught and common belief in the gaited horse world, and I believe it to be true in every breed that you could say, except maybe the gaited Morgan. Well, unless you wanted your gaited Morgan to be that. Don't canter your horse until it has that gait locked in. Don't let it know it can canter. Do not canter that horse. So you're not going to probably canter that horse until 5 or 6.
So I have an interesting question here for you, Diane. Someone's asking that they have a Pasofino that was started and trained and shown in Pheno gait, most collected. And when she adopted him at 15, he was high-headed with a quick, powerful up and down front legs. She's worked on lowering his head and replaced the curb bit with a snaffle and a yakima and done groundwork for relaxation, and now he isn't gaiting. Is it realistic to hope that he'll be able to gait again in this new frame?
Yes. Yes, Linda, definitely. Definitely. Here's
I think one of the things you have to realize is that's 15 years of a habit.
Bingo.
You have to gait in a particular posture. So just as a lead into your answer.
And again, and I do know this lady. Thank you, Linda. I don't know what x-rays you've had. Here's the thing that happens, and I actually was going to just talk about this, so how timely. She must know me well. There are some Pasofinos who are bred to do the Pheno. The Pheno would be the most collected gait in our gaited horse spectrum. So here's the Pasofino up here in their gait being very collected. If they were bred to do that, there's the sad thing for that breed. Great breed, by the way. Love the Pasofino. And I have a very good friend who uses Pasofinos in endurance, and she knocks them dead out there. Wendy. She just came back from a 3-day in Idaho and cleaned up. What happens, sadly, to some of the Pasofinos is somebody gets a Pasofino and they're all excited because they've seen these horses that do this incredibly vibrant, quick up movement, and they try to make their horse do that. By how? Pulling them in, holding them up, holding them tight, and their body quits flowing. The energy quits flowing. Some Pasofinos are not meant to be Pheno horses. They are meant to be very nice moving pleasure show horses or trail horses. I'm going to flip-flop all the way back again to the spectrum over here, the Tennessee walking horse. Misprinted all the time, and I know some of you have been told this. We do not collect our Tennessee walking horse up to do the running walk. The running walk is an extended walk. It's a length. It is the most extended walk on God's creation. And Wendy knows this. The very last gait introduced in dressage is an extended walk, because it's one of the most difficult gaits to grow the strength of the abdominals and to get lifted in the thoracic and allow that horse to carry that movement. So that's one place I'd like to bring our gaited horses more into the real equine world of correct terminology. So, yes, Linda, if he still has the ability, and I know you've done a ton of wonderful work with him, you're an amazing patient, and he begins to be able to find and be consistent with oscillation and starting to be able to come up and support himself with his hind legs, he will be able to find the gait again because it's bred into him. And he just will have to cross over that place of confidence that lets him know he's not going to have to gait like this anymore, that he's going to be able to flow on and go into gait. Yes, I do believe it's doable. Yes.
Would it be worth her looking to see if there's any degree of arthritis in his spine from the years of being ridden hollow?
And that's what I'm curious. Have you had x-rays of his spine, Linda? She's done a lot of work, Wendy. She has done a lot of work.
When you know that a horse has the breeding and capacity, but you don't see it coming out in the work, and you've worked that hard, it's one of the questions that you have to start asking. What is
Absolutely.
it a horse, if he's bred that way, he's been able to gait, but in a certain posture, and now the posture's changed. It's a valid question in my opinion to say, is there something we're missing? And could it be that?
So look at what she wrote back, Wendy. I'd forgotten about that. Thank you. So he's got arthritis in both stifles. Why? Because he was being asked to put undue strain into them. But she hasn't done the back, so that's interesting.
It would be worth talking to your vet about it and just asking the question, because if he has arthritis in the hocks, there's chances are he has arthritis other places. And Diane, there is a tapping sound. I'm wondering if it's just water dripping off the roof where you are because it's rhythmic.
It's a gated movement. I don't hear anything. I think it's
I hear it at my end. It started a little bit ago, but anyway. All right. Shall we go on?
I think it's the ocean. Okay. So when it comes to riding, again, it is our responsibility to make sure that the equipment that we are using allows us to sit in the most efficient place on the horse's rib cage to let them move freely. That is literally right behind the withers. Some of you have been told that we sit back on our gaited horses, that engages. This is, again, Wendy, this is another very common, traditionally taught equitation on many. Boy, I quickly go through the breeds that I see at horse shows and stuff. That if you sit further back, it's going to engage their hindquarters and they're going to go into gait. We need to be off of that horse's unsupported loin area so that they can use their hind end. They can coil and lift and their front end can come up. So please, again, it's our responsibility to learn and find how to ride in a balanced posture. I know a couple of really good riding instructors, by the way. You're supposed to laugh, Wendy.
Yeah, I smiled because I'm barely teaching. I haven't taught since the pandemic started, actually.
Don't be scared. You got it, girl. You got it under your belt. I know, I hear you. But anything that is true about correct posture, functional riding, the float of allowing a horse to move freely is what will allow our smooth-gaited breed horses to call on their genetic wiring and the freedom of movement and give you the gait that they have, that they were born with, and you can then strengthen it and make it more consistent and fun.
And Diane, I think you bring up a really excellent point here at the end, in that I've run into so many people that think, well, I bought a gaited horse, it should just gait. But as in everything else, a gaited horse has to be trained to gait consistently, and that includes strengthening to be able to carry the weight of the rider and maintain gait for longer periods of time. It's unrealistic to think that you're going to buy a gaited horse and you're going to be able to get on and ride it out on the trail for 2 hours, having, you know, the horse not in condition, and be able to maintain a gait for that length of time. It's not a realistic perspective.
And Wendy, you would not, well, you would believe, you've been out there a long time, the number of people, and I have students of mine, then they'll go, and I'll say, you know, this saddle, and they really do, they say that he's a gaited horse, he should gait no matter what I put on him and how I ride him. And I mean, they've gotten really, yeah, they do believe that. So I can't cook anyway, but if you gave me something other than a spoon to cook with, I'd be lost. We have to have things that work well and easily. And yes, we have to strengthen and allow, again, I'm going to dog on a bone with this. I promise you that if the horse's neck and head, the whole spine, if you watch from behind, from the tail, up the spine, up the neck, out the occipital, if that doesn't have a beautiful swaying oscillation or a snake-like movement, we are inhibiting, or our horse is inhibiting their movement. And it will not be able to have happen what you just suggested, Wendy, which is strengthening the gait to become better. Yes, yes.
Well, Diane, this has been fascinating. I didn't realize there were so many breeds. I mean, you brought up names of breeds I have never heard of before, and I don't claim to be an expert on the number of breeds, but there were some really interesting ones. And to learn that that gait is encoded in the genes, it's a genetic trait that, I mean, I've always said, you know, if the horse isn't gaiting in the field and you want a gaited horse, do not buy the one in the field, because if they're not gaiting already, they're not going to gait, you know, it's going to be very hard work to get them to gait with a rider. But I didn't realize just how deeply encoded that is into the genetics, and that it's a trackable trait, and how many breeds have it. That's fascinating. And I totally would agree with you that, you know, it's back to that comment that I made earlier that Arthur Cotta said, there's good riding and bad riding, and there's good function. You could apply that to so many things. There's good postural function for carrying the weight of a rider, and I refer to it as weight-bearing posture, versus you know, the horse in the field just wandering to get a drink of water, which is a very different demand on the system. It's not bearing weight, and it doesn't matter if it's a gaited horse, a smooth gaited horse, a 3-gaited horse, a 5-gaited horse, a 1-gaited horse. They still need to be in a weight-bearing posture if we're going to ride them.
And thank you, and you brought me back to something that I somehow let go, and it's so odd for me not to stay on point. But I started to talk about how it's very common to be instructed to not allow your smooth-gaited breed to canter until that gait is in. No. What happens, our smooth-gaited breeds have kind of an ironic dichotomy in that why they're so neat to ride is because they have at least one foot on the ground at all times. They might have 1 foot, they might have 3 feet, but it allows them to be smooth, right? Which is wonderful for us, until their bodies get so depressed and ground laden, that the thoracic sling starts to drop, the back starts to drop, and then they aren't so smooth anymore. And so, but that's okay. We'll put some different shoes on. Please, please, we can look at it. We can call it cross training if you want. Hopefully they're out, not stuck in a stall 24/7. They can at least be out and play. But you know that horses, they're so willing to please. And somebody really talked about that on one of your webinars, Wendy. They are so willing to please. They are not jerks. They do not make a decision, ha, here she comes. I'm going to really piss her off today. They don't think like that. Gaited horses, many breeds, but the gaited breeds tend to be incredibly personable, incredibly stoic, and they will do their best to please. So if you tell them no, don't canter for 3 years of their life, they will even get to the point they don't canter in the field. And their bodies start to absolutely die. They start to die on us. Trot your horses, canter your horses, let their bodies feel that energy.
And they can learn the difference between when you ask for gait, when you ask for trot, and when you ask for canter. I mean, it's just simply training.
What a concept! What a concept! What do you mean you don't want to? You give a cue for the canter, and you give a cue for the. Really? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, Diane, this has been, like I said, it's been really fascinating. It's been so interesting to learn more about just, like I said, the genetics of gaiting. And, it's really great to help people understand that we carry a lot of myths about horses.
Yes.
Carry them for generations, and they've been taught and passed down. But the bottom line is that we need to reevaluate given the knowledge that we have. And so many points that you brought up refer back to different webinars. Dr. Peters talking about the brain, Martina Nearhart talking about back pain we just had on Monday, the thoracic spine we had with the Equisoma folks. So any of you watching this webinar tonight, if you find that there's particular things that Diane talked about, just search back in the webinars, and I'm sure you'll find a webinar that kind of explains a little bit more, certainly about feet. There's plenty about feet. I mean, that's what we're just trying to do here, is a reference library, if you will, of all these webinars. So just remember, you can find all of the webinars on the Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. And if you like Surefoot, just go out and join Fans of Surefoot on the Facebook page. Also like our page, Surefoot Equine. This and all the webinars are available to be found on the Surefoot Equine website, surefootequine.com. On the calendar, you can always register from there to any of the webinars. And Diane, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for the effort you made to get to a good connection. It really made a difference. And it just really went so much better. Last night we practiced at her house, and it was rather difficult. I wasn't even sure we were going to have video. So she's really made a great effort to go to Sally. And do tell Sally thank you for me. I haven't seen her in a couple of years now, so I miss everybody out there.
Yeah. It didn't happen a couple of years ago when you were supposed to be able to come.
Yeah, I know. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Tomorrow my guest is Tracy Vroom. We're going to talk about craniosacral, so that's at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So check that out. It'll be a great, really interesting talk. And thank you again, Diane. It's been a pleasure to see you again, and it's been too long.
Been fun. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night. Bye.